Hi, I'm Judy Sedgman, and welcome to another edition of Innate Health, Eliminating Stress and Creating Healthy Communities. I'm so fortunate today to have as my guests Dr. Aaron Turner, whom you've met once before on this program, and his business partner, Mara Gleason. Mara and Aaron operate a company that is pretty much dedicated to dealing with organizational stress that's with institutions or businesses or any actually culture of people. And their real intent is to change people's understanding of the relationship between the state of their well-being, their state of mind, which is the same as what we're calling innate health, and how they function, how it all works out for them, what their life looks like, what their work looks like, what their productivity and their creativity look like. And I will say that they're very inspirational people. I love their work, I love what they do, and I'm very proud to share them with you. So since you've never been on the show before, Aaron, we'll start with Mara, we'll start with you. Okay. And tell me a little bit about what inspires you to work with organizations.
That's a really good question. I mean, there's so many things that I could talk about, but I think more than anything, the reason I love the work that we do is because I feel like we've been held back for a long time by a misunderstanding about how people's state of mind affects what they're trying to do in life, whether that's run a corporation, manage a group of people, or just simply be a nice human being to other individuals that we interact with on a day-to-day basis. So I feel like coming in and talking with companies about a really simple but profoundly different understanding of the freedom of mind that people have, the potential they have for resilience, clarity of mind, and well-being, completely independent of anything outside of them, anything going on in their work life, any external stressors as people traditionally consider them, that we're offering something truly revolutionary for people, that it's kind of a new paradigm or a new operating platform for how businesses operate. So not only does that translate to the bottom line, and that if people are bringing more potential, more clarity, more insight to what they're doing, that improves the quality of business. Yeah. But the really fun side effect, which I've directly experienced in my own life, is that it improves people's quality of life across the board. So what we're sharing with people in corporations about understanding their own freedom of mind, they're translating to how they interact with their children or their spouses. So it's really a profound new understanding of where a person's quality of life comes from. And there's business implications for that, but there's just general life implications. So yeah, I love doing it.
Yeah, I can tell.
Yeah.
So Aaron, when you have to explain, let's say I was a business person, you're meeting me for the first time, and I don't really understand what you do, but I really like you and I've heard great things, so I'm inclined to want to listen. How would you, in a nutshell, explain why this is different? What's different about it? And what are you going to do for me that all the other consultants that have come through haven't been able to accomplish?
Yeah, well, that's a really good question, Judy, and that's what we're interested in talking to businesses about.
Yeah.
And essentially what I'd be saying to you is, I have some understanding of what you're trying to do. You're trying to run a business, you're trying to be profitable, you're trying to, kind of make a place for yourself in the marketplace. So I have some understanding of what you're trying to do. And I know for a fact that there's something affecting your ability to do that you don't have your eye on. And not only don't you have your eye on it, but you have no idea how it works. So it's kind of like a homeowner having no idea that their foundation is bad and just figuring that replastering every year and redecorating every year is just the cost of business.
Yeah.
So there are certain aspects of business that are being affected by what Mara called the state of mind or the clarity of mind of people in businesses, that because it's invisible and unrecognized in the business world is just seen as the cost of doing business.
Yeah.
So there's things you're paying for that you don't have to be paying for. There's time and inefficiency and turnover and that's unnecessary, because people's state of mind is affecting everything they do, and that's invisible in business. It is slightly visible. So where you have a really capable leader or salesperson, they say, oh, they got that X factor.
Yeah.
Right? So it's a little bit of visibility, but it's not well understood. It's a little bit mysterious. Well, how do we affect that? Well, don't touch them too much. They might lose it. Or, paint the office a different color, or offer them more money, or so they have no real direct understanding. It's all a little bit superstitious. And they see it on the really negative end. So-and-so's going through a divorce and they just don't ask them to do anything because they mess it up. So at the extremes it's recognized, but what we're trying to bring to your business is a recognition that state of mind has been and always will be affecting your business. You can see that, it can become a visible factor to you, and if you understand it, it can be something that you can address. Firstly, to eliminate a lot of the inefficiencies and costs that it creates presently, but also to leverage it to higher levels of performance. So what created that synergistic team that people worked all hours and were energized and are dying to go back to it? Or why is it that certain person is just hitting the ball out the park on their sales numbers? Or what's this hot streaks thing about? And why do you get onto it and why do you fall off it? We're trying to make that a common garden understanding in business. And as Mara said, one of the side effects is that everybody's happier and enjoys their work more. So some companies we work with, not only are they doing great work, but they appreciate it so much that they often go to other companies because they've been offered more money, and then in hindsight they're like, oh, money's not really worth the quality of experience, so they go back. So
that's interesting.
Well, and just to add to what Aaron was saying, I think if the bare minimum of what we felt like we were offering organizations is just to cut a tremendous amount of that inefficiency, that would be great. That would be great fun. I'd feel like we were doing a service in the world. But the cooler part, which she touched upon, is that we're really talking about as people take leaps in their thinking or leaps in their level of consciousness, suddenly things become possible in an organization that people never thought were possible. So there's kind of the Einstein quote, you can't solve a problem at the level of thinking at which it was created. We feel like we're really showing businesses how to leap out of their old thinking and consider problems from a vantage point that they'd never considered before. That's the part where it gets really fun. Because we don't even know what's going to happen in a company when people start tapping into those parts of their state of mind, that potential that human beings have. So it's quite exciting.
Well, so tell me a story about a company that's just an example or two of what you're talking about, because it's really exciting when people hear it, but I know in my work, at least with businesses, there's always that credibility factor. It's like, it sounds great, but and they're happy, they look like nice people, but Joe's been in accounting for 30 years and he's always been grumpy and obnoxious and hard to work with. I can't believe he'd really change.
Well, one of the things that we're introducing to companies, it would be great fun to talk about different examples, but
we can talk for hours. I'm thinking, which one?
I was thinking the same thing, that people don't appreciate that some of the limitations they're dealing with are being caused because people's level of clarity and resilience isn't what it could be, right? So, for example, as a company we worked with recently, and one of the things they're working around is they're transitioning from a owner-run company to a manager-run company. And one of the things that exists is they've got this almost like division, down the middle of it. Well, people who like the old way and people who like the new way, and they figure, well, that's just a part of change, and when we go in and talk to people, we find that there's just an absence of a level of clarity of mind. And what does a level of clarity of mind look like? Well, it looks like an absence of stress, a level of comfort, even in the face of your own insecurities. And this is usually seen as a very soft thing, but what we're trying to show companies is it's directly tied to the way the organization performs. So you have these levels of discomfort in there, which essentially become lines of trust and communication. And so the company operates a certain way. There's kind of an inefficiency on the leadership teams. People don't talk to each other, right? So we have a conversation, we do a program with the leadership, and what the leadership realizes, God, there are ways in which my level of clarity and comfort are being interrupted. That I'm not comfortable with everybody. I'm kind of rushed in my own mind. So instead of actually sitting down and talking with you, I'm kind of just reeling things off and then disappearing. And the way that shows up is that you don't really trust me. Because you don't really believe that I've said what I have to say to you, which I haven't. I just reeled off a list to you. So because you're not comfortable in your mind, you're starting to think, well, what's really going on here? And you're starting to make up your own story. So everybody's going off in their own direction. Now, as soon as they see it as their own state of mind, hold on, I'm rushed here and I don't trust you. I've got to settle down and talk to you. All of a sudden, the level of comfort across the leadership team is increased. And all of a sudden, chronic problems of distrust that are creating political allegiances and essentially a whole bunch of leadership politics, within 2 weeks have disappeared. Because now everybody believes, well, you're talking to me, you're actually talking to me, and I'm confident that I'm hearing what you have to say. You're not holding anything back from me. And this ability to misinterpret where people aren't being clear and where they're not actually kind of being present with each other is disappearing. What was previously seen as an inevitable inefficiency of change, they're now seeing as a function of kind of not being clear and present with people, and it kind of solves itself.
So what have you taught the person? You know, what is it that the person grasped when they suddenly realized, gosh, I'm just spewing stuff at Aaron and I'm not really giving him my heart. I'm not really telling him why this is important or what I really care about.
We just yell at people and say, get clear.
Well, essentially what they didn't realize before is that the clarity of their mind is varying. And that the trustworthiness, the usefulness of what they're thinking is varying. Kind of like a computer with variable viruses. So you don't want to believe every number it spews out equally because they're not all equally reliable. And instead of seeing their own level of stress as a function of the amount on their to-do list, they suddenly realize, oh, my level of stress is an indication about my level of clarity. And rather than coming at me from the outside, is actually internally adjustable. And it's my responsibility as a leader to trust my clearer thinking and to kind of, breeze over my unclear thinking. So instead of operating in an unclear state and calling it clarity, slapping on the seal of approval, that they're suddenly starting to see, well, actually my level of clarity is varying, so actually that isn't useful. And then they end up with a clearer state of mind more and more of the time because they know it's coming from them, they know it's possible, and they see it as part of their job. So all of a sudden they're raising the bar on themselves.
Well, I know, Mara, in the business literature, there's been a lot recently about mindfulness and about meditation, about all these techniques that people try to use to clear their heads. Now, in my experience, that doesn't translate into the conversation with my associate 6 hours after I've meditated. Certainly it's been a long time since I tried that, but I do know that it was a temporary feeling of peace. And you're talking about something permanent and across the board. So can you talk about the distinction between the sort of the popular quieting down things people are doing now in business and what you're representing?
No, that's a great question because I think people are talking a lot about that now. I mean, the biggest, you touched on it for a moment there, but the biggest distinction I would make is that meditation is a technique or a practice, and a lot of books and business and all different fields right now are pointing to a variety of techniques and practices that are meant to help people quiet down from the inside out. And the idea being that as people quiet down from the inside out, that does something for their state of mind, which is in sync with what we're talking about in the sense that people's state of mind determines their performance in life and at work. But what we found is that, as Aaron's started to touch upon, is that if you can actually educate people about the mechanics behind how the mind works, how we even create a state of mind, that the deeper someone understands how it works, they don't have to apply a bunch of techniques, which, let's be honest, as you said, tend to be short-lived.
Yeah.
They're the first thing that go when we get overwhelmed, you know.
No time for that.
And yeah, they have a very short shelf life, you know,
Yeah.
so we're really good at you know, practicing things for a little bit of time, but then it's truly, you know, we default to a certain sort of whatever our understanding of life is what we kind of default to. So we're trying to come into organizations and basically through education shine a light for people on what's going on behind the scenes of a state of mind, so you could understand why meditation works when it works. You can also understand why you're a completely crazy person when you're a crazy person. You can understand why people don't communicate well when they're insecure. There's fundamental principles that we're highlighting for people that explain how a human being's state of mind works. And we feel that the deeper you educate people about that, the more they have in their bag of tricks for how to draw upon that in themselves. So just understanding what Erin pointed to, that it's actually in principle true that all human beings are experiencing their thinking moment to moment, not their circumstances. That alone can be revolutionarily enlightening for people. So it's not the fact that we're shifting management style. It's not the fact that the economy is affecting it's actually that my state of mind is something that's shifting internally. Just having that understanding really does something for where people put their effort and how much they're willing to, as Erin said, kind of breeze over moments of opportunity where they could have reset from within. So we're trying to educate people about the fundamentals of how it works, that your state of mind is coming from the inside out, and that as a human being, you're wired up to an unlimited potential for new thought, that's truly what's guiding your resilience and clarity of mind in the moment, and nothing else. So we feel that educating people gives them a lot more freedom in terms of how they apply it in their life than just saying, okay, I have to practice this thing or apply this technique. That's very limited in a way, whereas education is very empowering.
Yeah. Well, once you know it, you know it.
Yeah. And actually what we find in businesses and with people we work with is most of the approaches they're using take the way they're feeling as a given and try to work around it.
Yes.
Really good point.
Right?
Yeah.
So I'm stressed, what do I do about it?
Yeah.
Whereas we're saying if you understood what stress was and where it came from, you could get to it at source rather than have to dealing it once it's there. You know, it's kind of the prevention-cure relationship. And so we're trying to show individuals and organizations that you can understand it at source. So you don't have to deal with stress. Once you understand what it is, you can you can have a different amount of it. You know, you can relate to it differently. It will affect you differently. It will emerge differently. So that's what we're trying to point to.
So, you know, one of the definitions that I often use for stress in trainings that I do is stress is the weight of negative thought taken seriously without understanding. And that's almost a little bit obscure, I think, sometimes for business people, because they wouldn't call what they're thinking about negative. You know, when I'm working with the public, you know, they're, so they would say, well, you know, if you were dealing with the problems I'm dealing with, you'd be thinking these things too. So how do you define it? How do you talk about stress to people?
Well, stress is a difficult one because it's an area where people's awareness of the role of their own mind is really, really limited.
Yes.
So much so that a lot of people have a difficulty separating the environment as stress from the feeling as stress. So one of the things we try to show people is that stress is an experience. It's a feeling of, I don't know what you call it, tension, anxiety, tightness, right? That's what we're talking about. We're talking about the state of mind of stress, the lack of clarity, the amount of agitation, distraction, you know, cloudedness, whatever you call it. So so that's the way that we define it, as a tense or uncomfortable feeling state that indicates that you've lost your levels of clarity and mental resourcefulness. So we define it that way.
So it's different for people then to start thinking, oh, well, so stress is how I feel. It's not what company B did to my sales team or whatever. So, and the nice part about that, I guess, is as soon as I can own it, although I can see there'd be a moment of truth that might be a little difficult for people that like to blame company B. As soon as I can own it, I can fix it. It's like if it's mine. Yeah.
Yeah.
So is that kind of how it works for people, or what are some of the things that people say to you about how this impacted them? What struck them?
Well, it's funny because as you were talking, I was thinking there was one client that said to me once, "This is like the ultimate accountability model. You know, I really have to see my role in it." But then she went on to say, "But the truth of the matter is, that's the most freeing place to look, because actually, I don't have to wait for something outside of me to change this experience." And I'll often use the metaphor because for some reason it just sticks with me of kind of, in our experience of stress, it's like our mind works like an aperture. So there's kind of an opening where you're getting more light in versus a closing where you're getting less and less light. And there's a feeling of restriction to that. And if people see that their own mind, their own way in which they're relating to their thinking is what's driving that expansion or contraction of the aperture, it's a huge relief to see that actually I'm the one in the driver's seat here. I'm the one that's having some effect over this. This is not coming at me. So, you know, often it's really funny, but when we do trainings with people, some of the first things they see is that their commute in the morning is going to be really different. And they come in and they say, you know, I had the strangest experience of sitting in the same bumper-to-bumper traffic that would normally get me so stressed and tense, whether I had something I had to be in first thing in the morning for or not. And so people start to see that, wait a second, this contracting is happening inside of me. And it seems like a small thing to consider it in terms of traffic, but that's something people do every day in their life. And that's a little thing, and then they can see and apply it to bigger things. But it's amazing that, you know, those are experiences that everyone can relate to.
You know, it's funny that you say that because it's a long time since I first got involved in this work, but I had this moment of insight about how I was working myself up on the way to work without realizing it, because I'd have all these thoughts about what was going to happen, but of course it never was what happened. But I'd be sure it was going to happen. I'd be all. So the first time that I actually just left the house in a peaceful state of mind, I'm driving to work and I thought, gosh, everybody's planted flowers.
Like yesterday.
What's happening here? Do they have like a garden sale or something? I was looking around and I'm going, look at all these incredibly beautiful flowers. So I went home and I said to my husband, I said, I couldn't believe it. Did we miss out? Was there a plant sale? He said, no, they've always been there. But I was so consumed with my own, you know, stressful thinking that I didn't even see what I was driving through.
And one of the problems we're trying to address is that professionals believe that experience to be a clear perception of what they're dealing with. Whereas what we're trying to show them is that is an unclear mind that can't deal with it.
Exactly.
And that's a big shift. That's a big shift for them, because if you think that the stress has something to do with the situation, it feels responsible to have an unclear mind. And you're kind of exerting all this energy, and it's all lost in friction. You know.
That's an interesting way to put it.
Well, and furthermore, as people, I mean, one of the things that we often hear from people is that they start to realize how much more juice for the squeeze there is within them as they start to experience the same stressors, you know, the same external circumstances, but with a completely different state of mind. And Aaron had one client who sort of sheepishly called him up and quietly said, you know, I hate to say it, but I sort of feel like I have a part-time job now. And this was a guy who was a total workaholic. I mean, he was putting in 12 to 14-hour days on a regular basis. And he just was absolutely amazed at how much he could get done in a fraction of the time. And that's what we're really pointing to. That's as people's quality of mind increases. You just start to get an appreciation for how much more powerful you are than you realize.
And how much time you waste. And the other thing he said was, you know, I realized that I was doing all that stress. It wasn't happening to me. I was doing it, and I'm not doing it anymore. So I get all this free time. Because I was juggling 2 jobs, doing the stress and doing my job. You know?
Right, that's what I always thought before. I used to think that. At first I was managing all these crazy thoughts, and then I was trying to manage my life, my company, my family. It was a little much. You know? So
a little much.
That's interesting. So I guess as we near the end of the program, I'd like to give you a chance to really go ahead and talk about the logic that you've referred to, how it works and the logic behind it. But, you know, give us a taste of that. Talk, each of you in your own way, talk about what is that logic? What is it that's really explanatory? Whoever wants to go first.
Yeah, I'm fine
Okay.
going first. So the logic is that people's minds is determining what they're able to do and how well they're able to do it. And there's just an unbelievable potential to that is exhibited at, you know, high levels of performance and high levels of well-being. And those two things go together. And the only thing that gets in the way of people using this tremendous potential of the mind is their misunderstanding of how it works. So they unknowingly feel themselves resigned to lower qualities of mind because they don't understand how the internal dynamics work. So their mind sells them a low quality thought, and they don't realize there's a lot more stock. They don't have to, it's not like only one item in the store, and okay, I'll buy it, you know.
Yeah. I don't like it, but I'll buy it.
Yeah, and so they're unknowingly resigning themselves to such a limited quarter of the mind. It's unknowingly coming from their mind, and they're unknowingly settling for it, and there's all this potential left on the table. And if they could only see the way that their belief in the reality of their thinking, the belief in the reality of their state of mind is the only stumbling block. As soon as they take that in stride as just a fluctuation of their mind, a natural automatic fluctuation of their mind, they're kind of at the bus stop for all that potential.
Yeah.
I mean, I would just be reiterating what Erin said in my own words, but you know, I think the fact that our thinking shows up as real to us is a real trick of the mind, and if we don't understand it, we can get really caught in it. So it's very understandable that when I feel bad, it doesn't seem like, well, this is just a fluctuation in my thought right now, it'll pass. No, the way the human system works is that consciousness brings it to life through my whole sensory system such that I experience it as real. So when I'm sitting in traffic, ticked off, it feels very real.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm very annoyed. So for people to just see the freedom that actually there's the way to understand the amazing special effects system of the human mind such that I'm just experiencing whatever kind of thinking I'm in the moment, but that actually comes from this unlimited potential for new thought. I mean, thought is just energy that takes a form. It comes from a formlessness. And so the fact that we have in us a potential for infinite new forms to take shape in our minds is really truly saying to people that there's unlimited forms that our reality can take, and that can be flowing through your sensory system in the next moment as opposed to that tension. And I think there's something truly profound and magical and yet everyday about that that's really helpful for human beings to come to understand.
I agree. I think that's beautiful. Well, on that note, I want to thank you both very much for joining me today. I loved listening to you talk and exchanging ideas, and I hope that next time you're around, you'll come back again.
Absolutely.
So thank you, Mara Gleason, thank you, Erin Turner, and
Pleasure.
thank you all for being with us on another edition of Innate Health.
Thank you.